Let's get into the news. Most important news this week. CM Punk has returned to professional wrestling.
God damn it. It's happened. It actually happened.
And it
You
happened
knew it
at the
was gonna
top of the
happen.
fucking show. Oh my God. The entire fucking arena was just
Erupted.
chanting his name for like probably 2 hours. And then at the top of the show, he comes out.
Well, you can't.
They
You
didn't
can't.
tease
And you
it.
can't close the show with it because then you got to deal with the chants for that full hour.
That's true.
So you got to
and
open
somebody
the
comes
show
on the
with
mic
that.
and it's like, CM Punk is gone. He went home.
Yeah,
He
he had to go.
Wow.
The ice cream melted. He had to
Exactly.
leave.
Yes.
I can't believe
Yeah, he
he's
supplied
back.
ice cream to everybody.
Yeah.
Who is
So-
he?
So CM Punk
He
is
is- oh,
all right.
Jesus.
Let's see. So
The
CM
Second
Punk is
City
a
Saint.
professional wrestler who's been gone for about, I believe it was 7 years.
7 years.
He was in WWE for a chunk of time prior to that. And then
Some
prior to
Ring of
that
Honor
was
stuff.
around Ring of Honor and a lot of indies, stuff like that, and became like the definitive indie darling. And then made his way into WWE, and people were very hopeful about what he would do there. And he did some really amazing stuff while he was there, and he was mired in a lot of dumb shit while he was there as well. And
When you say amazing stuff, what do you mean?
I mean,
like-
there are probably like 3 moments over the last, I don't know how long, let's say 10 years, 15 years, whatever it was, that I would talk to people who are not wrestling fans about and say, hey, this wrestling got good again. Hey, this is a thing that even if you don't really care about wrestling anymore, this thing happened.
Yeah.
And though, like, the 2 things prior to that were the debut of the Nexus, when they showed up and tore the ring apart, and fucking Daniel Bryan choked a fucking ring announcer, and I think they beat the shit out of John Cena, right? Is that what it
Yep.
was? So there was that. It was like,
Okay.
whoa, this is an insane moment. You need to see it. And the second was the CM Punk pipe bomb promo, where he
Yep.
basically
What?
sat down on the
on the-
ramp and quote unquote got real, for as much as wrestling gets real, right? But
yeah.
Shoot.
but it was this moment of, and the moments around that, where CM Punk's contract was up, or was it? And basically the idea that he took the belt and left, like he won the championship and then disappeared, and was posting pictures on social media of him with the belt in his fridge and dumb shit like this. And it was this, it felt bigger than wrestling. It felt like this larger, real moment that was happening that blurred the lines so effectively that you needed to, it really stood out from, especially from a lot of the other stuff that company was doing at the time.
This character was relatable because he was standing up against this like huge wrestling machine that was the WWE, that fans secretly and inadvertently fucking hated at times, and he stood out and stood for them in some way.
Weird, for as much as like he was also a part of that company and a part of their storylines, like, it wasn't like he
Right.
was walking out there and doing his own thing every night, It's,
Yeah, not every night, but
and they did a good job with him up to a point of making him feel like he was something special and different, right up until you get to the point where that company likes to have its stars groomed a certain way. And John Cena is obviously huge, and I like John Cena. I think he got a lot of bullshit back then that I don't think he
Sure.
deserved. But basically, it got to a point where he left the company, and there were lawsuits in the wake of that over an injury that was. He talked about an injury on a podcast, and then they got sued, and that went through this whole thing of basically him saying like that the WWE doctor misdiagnosed him and all this other stuff, and so.
Jeez.
It went through this whole rigmarole. He came back to WWE when they had a show on Fox. It was like an out of the ring show of like him being a commentator or like an analyst, basically. Like they would talk about it. And he showed up a few times there, but it was dumb. And you basically, the story was he had kind of lost his passion for wrestling, but people chanted his name in every city, especially when they deemed a match to be boring, which I think is super shitty of the fans.
Yeah.
And like, there was a lot of good matches that took place while that dude's name was being chanted at a point where you're just like, this sucks. Like, if the dude doesn't want to wrestle, then he shouldn't fucking wrestle, and people need to just fucking move on.
Yeah.
But he came back on Friday night and joined AEW, which is this fledgling, maybe isn't even the word anymore. Like, up and coming, they're here. You know, they're
Is AEW akin to like ECW?
More like
Like,
a WCW.
you know my wrestling brain,
Sure.
right? My
so
wrestling
it's
brain
akin to
is
ECW
90s.
in that it has that spirit. So AEW is a sort of program that I think its supporters. All right, there's a lot of people watching stuff illegally, right? There's a lot of, like, hey, I'm going to watch the West Coast feed of this show is delayed 3 hours, so I'm going to watch it over here on this live stream, this bootleg live stream.
News to me,
AEW is the type of show
sure.
where I think there's an element of like, I want to watch this show legitimately so that I can stand up and be counted as like moving the needle on this, of like showing people that this alternative brand, that this new brand is
what I want.
what I want,
Yeah.
as opposed to what WWE has been doing.
Because there's a spirit of ECW there.
Yeah,
then,
Yes.
I
So I
guess.
think that there's a kinship there where, like, I think the fans of it feel an ownership of it, and feel possessive and protective of it in a way that sometimes goes super overboard. And you can find people like defending or trashing one company over the other online. The fanboyness of that is of a Microsoft and Sony nature at some point.
What it feels like
boy.
is that also AEW kind of actually respects their audience in a way that stuff is actually being organically built up. And, like, you have your fair share of wrestlers that are being crammed down your throats or whatever, but even that is done thematically. While it's really hard to watch some WWE programming because there's like little to no payoff sometimes, and sometimes the payoff or something that's gaining momentum, corporate oversight is just like, no, we don't want that because we didn't come up with it. And because like with like the Dark Order in AEW, for instance, I wasn't too sold on them initially because I was like, what is this cult gimmick? What's going on here? And then, like,
I loved it right until those punches started getting thrown, and you're just like, oh, they just killed it. But like, they totally didn't. It's one of my favorite things they've got going.
And they wound up pivoting it to like, okay, this cult group is no longer just a cult group. They're like a group of buddies.
Support group.
Yeah, they're a support group for each other. And then they teamed up with a cowboy. And like, I wasn't sold on the cowboy at first.
Oh, I was sold on the cowboy from day one.
God damn it! I gotta watch this shit now.
But then, like, it's one of those things of like, I don't remember the last time I've yelled at my TV watching wrestling for like a storyline reason that I was actually upset about, and not just something where it's like, oh, well, the face of the company won because the face of the company won. It wasn't because of bad booking. It was because I was legitimately upset of like, why didn't he win? Type of thing.
Yeah.
Versus, like, well, of course that person won. Or like, if someone loses in AEW, it means more because they track the wins and losses. Where in like WWE,
Oh, that's cool.
This past weekend, the top
They'll
person,
show like who's the number one contender, to the title.
You got
or
stats?
whatever.
yeah, it actually
And
matters.
they have
To an
stats.
extent.
They work it, right. I mean, it matters when it
Yeah.
matters. It doesn't when it doesn't. Like if they have a new guy debuting, they want to put in a match. Like, they'll find a way to make it work even without the honoring the rankings. But
Right.
I think
Malachi Black.
that helps add an element to it. But I think the thing that AEW does that WWE used to do and doesn't anymore is, by and large, most of the characters in AEW feel like they are on a path and they have something that at least resembles a storyline, even if the matches aren't always like super built up. Because they give you fresh matchups week in, week out. They don't necessarily beat a feud down your throat every week on TV. But it still feels like each character has like their thing that they're working to do, that they are supporting this guy to do this. Like the Dark Order is working with Hangman Page, and Hangman Page is, I think something happened. He's not on TV for a little bit, but
Yeah.
Like that whole storyline felt like all those characters mattered in that
It was
storyline.
and it was a slow burn too. Like they
Right.
had lots of shit going on backstage where Adam Hangman Page was just like listening in on the conversations of the Dark Order and shit like that. He's like, should I join? Should I not join? I don't know.
There's
I don't like the color purple.
Yeah, there's just a lot of neat stuff there. I think by and large, they seem like they are having fun and they are rolling with it in a way that is super engaging. And they don't have 9,000 hours of television.
Well,
they're approaching it.
Approaching.
They have 3 hours, 3 hours of TV, and then
they
like
got 3 shows,
the two YouTube shows now too. So
oh shit.
Okay.
But that's before you include everyone's vlog.
Yes. Okay, if you want to watch all the
elite,
which I tapped out on a lot of that stuff a long time ago. But yeah, they've been really fascinating to watch because it feels like wrestling being put together by someone who has been at times frustrated by the state of American wrestling, in much the same way that I have, and they're doing well with bringing in old names and building new names and all this other stuff that like you pull for them. You want to see them pull it off. And with WWE these days, I feel like there are a lot of people there that I think can wrestle amazing matches and do all this really cool shit. And I think that they're great characters that talk really well, and they don't get those opportunities. And when they do, it's for dumb reasons. And it's just like, I feel like there's just a constant self-inflicted series of errors, or that I perceive to be errors, right? On their end, they're putting out press releases saying SummerSlam was the most watched event we've ever had. Like they're out there saying that they're fucking doing incredible. So
Right.
maybe to them, as they gut NXT and try to rebuild the land of the giants type stuff that built them in the 80s and 90s, like it really seems like they're almost going back to that whole thing of like, oh, we're done with small guys.
Yeah.
Like it's a weird thing. And
Interesting.
yeah, so it's just a fascinating landscape for wrestling. And the CM Punk stuff, I think, is like one of the first big catalysts that they'll have this year that will kind of
Really
like raise
turn
the
heads.
flag in a way that like, hey, if you tuned out of wrestling, you might want to check this shit out that we're doing over here. It seems like that's the line they're trying to ride of like, okay, CM Punk's a big enough name that like that's going to bring us some people, and maybe Adam Cole will bring over some people. And then do we get to a Charlotte Flair down the line? Like what's going to because that women's division in AEW could use some stronger competition. Like if they start to line up those pieces, if you get a Daniel Bryan, a Bryan Danielson, whatever in there too, plus all the homegrown plus all the talent that they have signed and put on to national television, plus the people that have done amazing stuff in Japan, you get a Kenny Omega, you get the Bucks, like all this other stuff. Like they're really putting together like a really fascinating roster and like putting on really compelling television. And that's been the coolest part about it, is like feeling that way about wrestling again in a way that like I haven't in a very long time.